Okay, our activities focus for an introductory art class meant for ninth grade high school. An art activity overview. So this class is designed as an introductory high school level fine arts course. The activities included in our presentation cover some key terms and vocabulary that would be needed to progress within the fine arts discipline. The vocabulary in these activities cover basic Tier 3 art terms, including mediums, elements of art, and the color wheel. The vocabulary is appropriate for students with little to no prior knowledge of the fine arts and will help introduce them to broader topics within the arts discipline. Through learning and understanding these terms, student will create a foundation that will enable them to excel in future art courses with ease.
For our first activity, we will start with the color wheel charts and scales. So this activity will target the vocabulary that is a combination of listening, reading, and speaking, as well as writing and application. Uh, the words in the activity targets the pre-active phase. So the vocabulary is introduced, defined, and conceptualized to prepare students for the interactive and reflective phases of conceptual growth. And the targets for this activity are the Tier 3 vocabulary. And then some of the vocabulary that I chose to include was like primary, secondary, tertiary colors, as well as tint, tone, shade, and hue. The student-facing activity version, the students will be asked to learn about color theory through exploration by mixing colors. They will be provided a 11 by 17-inch paper with a template of a circle, and they will be using either acrylics or gouache paint. For the color wheel activity, the students will divide the circle into 12 even parts in which they will begin to number the sections. And the students will first begin by painting in the painting in the primary colors in the corresponding section. They will be introduced to what the terms mean. They will then learn what the secondary colors definitions are, and they will learn how to mix the colors in their palette, and they will begin by painting the corresponding sections. And then lastly, they will learn the definition of the tertiary colors. And then for this part, they will again mix the secondary colors to complete the final color wheel. And for the color scales, they will learn the definition of tint, tone, and shade by completing a set of 3 color scales. So they will select a hue and then mix either white, well, they will mix white, black, and gray to finish the 3 sets of tint, tones, and shades. And for the teacher-facing version, um, again, the students will be asked to divide the circle into 12 even parts. They will learn the definition of the primary colors, the secondary colors, and the tertiary colors. And then you will ask the students to fill in the colors in the corresponding sections you will ask the students to mix colors in their palettes. And then again, after they have completed their color wheels, they will learn the definition of tint, tone, and shades. And then here I labeled row 1 will be a tint in which they select the hue of their choice and mix white to create a gradation scale. In row 2, they will learn about tone. They will again select a hue and add gray and then complete this like bottom grayscale. And then in row 3, they will create shades by selecting a hue, adding black, and then creating a gradation.
Okay, so the activity that I worked on was the crossed medium translation. So the purpose of this activity is to encourage students to draw the same subject matter using 3 different types of mediums. For the beginner students who don't know the different artistic mediums, this will help them differentiate between these techniques and allow them to compare how each medium affects their final artwork. This targets visual arts media vocabulary and is a combination of listening, speaking, reading, and doing. And the vocab is intended to be tier 3 and is specific to studio art. With the hands-on experience, this exercise is designed to help them differentiate between the different techniques and artistic mediums that they can use in a studio art class. So the pre-active phase, so basically the teacher will begin by listing the vocabulary words that the students are going to learn. So that's watercolor, marker, pen, oil painting, acrylic paint, and colored pencils. So for the students will pick three different mediums and use each one to create a side-by-side drawing of the same sub object. A simple object will be provided for the students to observe and draw. I picked them doing a still life because I believe this will train their eye to better visualize shapes and organic and geometric shapes and translate that onto the paper. So from the teacher's perspective, the teacher will give the directions to the students and will also go around and answer any clarifying questions that the students may have. So during the interactive phase, the teacher will hand out a packet for the students to reference on what each medium is and what each medium looks like with a colored image of this for the students to reference. Teacher will begin to explain the class each media vocabulary and then pass around the object that the students will have to draw. Students will spend the class time eyeing their object, sketching it out 3 times, and then using their 3 mediums of choice to color it in. Finally, for the reflective phase, so at the end of this activity, students will have the hands-on experience experimenting with different artistic mediums and learning how each one differs from the others. Students will reflect on the differences of each medium in a class discussion and present their work. The teacher will ask questions such as, what is the difference between watercolor and markers? And knowing how your 3 mediums work, how can you use them to make a multimedia piece?
Our third activity is called visualizing vocabulary. This is the teacher-facing version, so it includes the explanation and the steps for teachers to do during the activity. So for this activity, students will create an artwork that captures their individually assigned vocabulary word, and this will strengthen their understanding of basic art vocabulary. Some of the vocabulary words that it would include would be the elements of art, like line, shape, form, and the principles of art: balance, emphasis, movement, pattern. After they finish working on their actual art pieces, the students will hang up their artworks and work in small groups to decide which vocabulary word is represented in each artwork. Each group will share out their answers to the whole group, and the class will determine if they all arrive to the same conclusions. If not, groups can provide their arguments on why they think it represents a certain vocabulary word or not. After the class narrows down to a specific word, the artist should inform the class of their assigned word. This is the student-facing version of the assignment. So during this activity, each student will be assigned a vocabulary word, like I mentioned, and they will be provided an 11 by 17-inch mixed media paper and their trays of material that we would have learned in the beginning of class, which would be graphite, colored pencil, marker, pens, or oil pastels. With their materials, they'll create an artwork that demonstrates their vocabulary word, and after they finish, they'll hang them on display for a group activity. In small groups, they'll work together to look at each artwork and make their arguments on why they think certain works represent a certain vocabulary word. As a whole class, each group will share their conclusions, and the original artist will share the original vocabulary word reflected in their artwork. This activity targets a combination of students' listening and speaking skills as they work in small groups and as a whole class to determine the vocabulary word represented in each artwork. This activity fits best into the interactive phase. It encourages students to develop their independence as artists by creating their own compositions and interpretations of art vocabulary. In a high school level introductory course, it is important for students to develop their knowledge of artistic elements and principles. So these terms are regarded as Tier 3 vocabulary words specific to art that are necessary to learn at an introductory level so they can further excel within the art discipline. This assignment emphasizes these artistic features and encourages students to identify them within actual art rather than just knowing their textbook definitions. This assignment will demonstrate the students' understanding of these vocabulary words and concepts, how they can implement them within their own artwork, and how to identify them in others.
Okay, so for the fourth activity, this is going to be an art history observations activity. And what students will be doing is students will be doing an interactive exercise where they will partner up and observe historical works of art. Students will be required to make evidence-based inferences about the artwork, identify techniques and what medium the artist used, and fill out a worksheet with their group member to organize their thoughts. This targets art historical vocabulary and is an observational exercise for students and ELL students to learn artistic vocab. This vocab is a tier 3 and is specific to studio and fine arts. And this exercise is designed to help them build their observational skills and expose them to different techniques and artistic mediums that historical artists have used in the past and that they can use for their future artistic pieces. So the pre-active phase, the teacher is going to introduce the lesson to the class and have them printed handouts of each artwork hung up around the classroom. The teacher will then hand out worksheets for the students to fill out with questions pertaining to the piece that they're going to be observing. And, just some generic questions that will allow them to think and observe. It would basically influence their observations. So students will partner up with one classmate to do the activity, and then the teacher sets the time limit that each group will get per painting and then switch once the time is up. So that's going to be 5 minutes per piece. For the interactive phase, the students will walk around the classroom and start filling out the worksheet, having discussions about their observations and inferences, and discuss any details they notice through the pieces. Once the time is up, the groups will move on to the next piece of artwork. The teacher will be going around the classroom and observing the students' discussions, as well as asking any questions to ease their confusion and make them think critically. For the reflective phase, so at the end of the activity, this teacher will bring the class together for brief discussions about the students' findings and inferences, and then the teacher will also reveal the original artist's name, title, and historical context. During this time, students will have an open discussion about their observations, inferences, and have the opportunity to ask questions and open up about what they found to be interesting. And that is it for our presentation for an intro to art class.